For those of you who don't know me, my name is Annie Martin and I'm chair of the District 73 Education and Training Team. Absolute hoot to be here today. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be great. Firstly, I do want to thank Graham. He's made the techie side of this possible. He is recording it. He's also going to be our timer. In terms of it being recorded, please know that it won't be long and you can go to the District 73 webpage and you will find recordings of past sessions there. Speaking of which, if you have a look there today, you'll find the All About Anaheim session. That's also under the past session recordings. That was a get-together that we had a couple of weeks ago interviewing the trio and Jodie Donche. So that is already on our recordings. I would also like to thank Elise Lonsdale. She is competing tonight, so she's on the other side of the judges, so she isn't here, but she's been a great tower of strength in terms of other techie support. So thanks, Elise. And to our three judges. Fabulous to have them here. I'm not introducing you guys, Jackson's doing that, but I am thanking you for coming. And I'm saying I'm thrilled that we are representing the district across Adelaide, Melbourne, Albury-Wodonga, admittedly not Tassie, but I can see some Tassie people there in the audience. So contact me after and we'll work out how in future sessions we can get some more Tassie representation too. We are a district across 3 states. Also like to thank 3 very brave mock contestants. I've been chatting to them all. They're all remarkable people. They're still a little bit secret from you, but that's okay. You're going to be finding out soon who they are as we move through the session. And finally, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Jackson Green. Jackson is chairing our session today. He's a fabulous guy. Let me tell you a little bit about his Toastmasters career. He'll tell you about his tax career. I'm not going to do that. I'll tell you about his Toastmasters career, the parts that I know. That is that he is currently a member of South Yarra, CFA D13 and TOC the Advanced Club. And previously he's been a member of Monash. He's been a Toastmaster for only 8 years. You wouldn't believe that because he's already competed at district level on a number of occasions. And recently he's competed in international, he's competed in evaluation where he's placed second, and in table topics he has placed first. All right, so this guy knows what it's like to be on the other side of judges. And he's probably thinking, well, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. You know, don't we all think that about judges? But gee, we couldn't do any contests without them. So it's absolutely paramount that we have a chance to be a bit sneaky and see exactly what's going on inside their heads. Jackson is a man whose judgment I trust. There we go. So there is no better person to be chairing this session and delighting you with all the details of what goes on inside the mind of a judge. Please welcome Jackson by either clapping, it'll be silent, by clapping or doing this or even a cute emoji. And please welcome Jackson Green.
Thanks, Annie. What a wonderful introduction. I couldn't have worded it any better. Great to be here tonight. And how it's going to work is, so we'll have a mock contest later on, but before we get through the nitty-gritty and the interviews and all of the exciting things, I'd like to introduce each of the judges. We don't normally do this. In a standard contest, they'd be completely anonymous from start to finish, but I think because they're doing such a nice job and helping us out, it's really good to be able to recognise their efforts, and we've picked 3 really experienced judges. And the first one on my list who I'll introduce is Cate Press. So Cate joined Toastmasters all the way back in 2013. It was April Fool's Day, but it was no joke that she joined. Her contributions have been enormous. She's judged at the highest national level, which is the district. And she's even competed and made it to the area level in the humorous. And she hopes one day to get all the way to district. And I'm sure as soon as she stops judging and concentrates on competing, she'll do that very well. She got into Toastmasters wanting to give speeches and improve her public speaking, but she's done a lot of leadership behind the scenes as well. And it's been really amazing to see her judging at all contests on many different levels. So welcome, Cate. Round of applause. Thanks, Kate. And next on my list is Greer. So Greer McGearey, you've probably seen her around a lot. I know I have. I don't think I've been to a contest without Greer present in some form. She's judged at many different levels, including the district, and she's been chief judge for the district, I believe, 3 times, online in Melbourne and in South Australia as well. So what a resume. Her Toastmasters career goes all the way back to 2008 when she joined Whitehorse. She's also a founding member of Glen Iris. Not many people can say they've started up a club, but Greer also has that illustrious honour. And she's been VPE 5 times, which is 5 more times than I probably ever will put my hand up for that role. I know how much goes into it, and that's an amazing achievement. So Greer is very well qualified to judge. Welcome, Greer.
Thank you.
And then finally, we've got Mr. Darrell Klar joining us all the way from South Australia. And he is an IT guru, very good with technology, and he's really used that to his advantage as a part of the leadership positions he's been doing with the district to help clubs and our district itself run meetings like this. And he's also a very esteemed judge. He's judged at many different levels and a competitor as well. I remember competing against him a couple of years ago at the district in 2022, and he came second in the evaluation contest. So he'll be able to provide some really good insight, both as a contestant and as a judge. Please welcome Darrell Klar. Perfect. And those are our wonderful judges. So what we might do now, we'll have a bit of a Q&A with the judges, get to know them, get to grill them a little bit, but that'll probably come later on with the contestants. And it'll be a bit of a panel discussion. So I'll pose a question and we'll go around not the table, but the cyber table, we could probably call it. And we might start with Kate, then we'll go to Greer, and then we'll go to Darrell. So my first question for you all, as judges, sometimes you might see a competition and it's really close between one contestant and another. So how do you differentiate the two if you're thinking, wow, they're so close, they're almost on the same level? What do you look for to differentiate A and B? Kate.
I have to admit, I was in that position in one contest and I really couldn't split the 2 speakers. And I thought back to the audience response, and that was actually what I ended up going on, because I just felt that one had had a bit more response from the audience, and I felt that that was the fairest way to split it, because I thought obviously that one had just resonated a little bit more with the audience, so therefore audience reaction should just go up a little bit. It was tough, it was hard, and I was talking to someone afterwards and they were saying, oh, you shouldn't have done that. And I went, I didn't know how else to split it. And there'd been such a amazing cheer and applause after one. And I thought, yeah, it has to be that one.
Well done, Kate. Thanks, Greer.
One of the fortunate things is that as a judge, you don't have to tell anyone why you went one way or the other. The important thing, I think, is very similar to Kate, is that you end up sort of, once you've listened to all the speakers, and if you've got 2 that are, you might have scored almost identical, is to go back and sort of there's this ultimate, what resonated me, just that little bit more resonated with me, whether it's the audience reaction or they just use the floor space, just that little bit better to emphasize the quality of their speech. And that will tend to sway me a little bit more than necessarily audience reaction. That's important, but it's got to resonate with me in the first place.
Wonderful. And Darrell?
I think for me, it's a little bit of both responses so far. Obviously, it depends on the contest itself, but on the ballot, there are different elements of the presentation that have different weightings, essentially. So, for instance, with international, you've got 50% for, the delivery And when I need to do a count back, I generally feel sort of when there's a particular element that has a higher weighting, then I'll specifically focus on those, because that's the concept of that particular contest. And when I do a count back, as I go through each line, I put a little arrow, whether it's an up or a down arrow, into whether I would potentially push that score higher or lower, and then actually have a look and see if that assists. So it's very specific to the contest, but certainly, you know, you get a bit of an idea once you have a look and you go back through your numbers.
Well done. Thanks, Darrell. Now, just before we continue, I can see someone by the name of Harshita has their hand raised. Are we taking questions from the audience?
Oh, sorry.
I've just contacted that person privately. No, not at this stage, Jackson. I think just keep going.
Okay, sure. I'll keep going.
I just wanted to add a point, if that's okay, or it is only Darrell and Cate.
Yeah, sure.
So for me, I always go to the purpose why the contest is. For example, international speech contest is to inspire. So who inspired better? And humorous speech is to like make laugh, kind of fun. Who made them laugh more? And table topics, who conveyed the message in a succinct way. That's the purpose. And also evaluation is like who gave clear feedback with examples and everything. So I always, when there is close call, I always go back to the purpose of the individual contest.
Thank you. And we'll hand back to Jackson now. Thank you very much.
Well said. And that sort of ties into what I want to ask next with respect. So you've got the criteria there, but what if you get a topic that you don't really like? How difficult can it be to assess that person based on the merits of their speech rather than the biases you might have? I know Brett Kenny, a very humorous person within Top Toastmasters, he loves talking about his job as an accountant. Now, some people rightfully so hate accountants. So if it's a topic you don't like, how do you sort of push that to one side and judge them fairly? Cate.
Thank you, Jackson. I actually don't think that it's on me to like the content of the speech. It's the vocal use, it's the language, it's the stage movement, it's the body language, it's how they construct the speech. But they can be sitting there and talking about something that I completely disagree with, and I don't really care. It's how they deliver it. It's the quality, not the actual content in the subject matter. So you can sit there and talk to me about something that I'm totally opposed to, but if you do it well, I'll sit there and say, yeah, kudos.
Perfect. Greer?
Yeah, so I over my lifetime, I've found that I'm quite objective in listening to speeches long before I was in Toastmasters. But very similar to what Cate, you've got the topic of the speech that's going to be given. You listen to the speech, and then using the criteria, you can sort of say, well, they've addressed the topic well, and use the other criteria to give it plus or minuses in your own mind. Just to give an example, and I won't go into any detail about it, but in recent years, well, the last 12 months, I've heard a speech in which the opening words were of a very contentious issue around the world, but the speaker ended up balanced the views very well, and regardless of which side of the fence the audience was sitting on, you had to admire the way in which the balance of the speech was done, so that it didn't really matter whether you agreed or disagreed with the issue that the person was talking about. So I feel that I'm generally very objective in that sense.
Thanks, Greer. Darrell?
Yeah, I concur with what's been said. I think the actual content itself isn't judged. The closest you get to that is appropriateness. So there's elements within the rubric about how appropriate the speech is. And given the audience or the setting, that's where that score can be impacted depending on how they deliver it. So it's never about the topic. It's more about whether it was suitable for the occasion or the audience. That's where that score would be impacted.
Fantastic. Thanks, Darrell. Now, I've got another question to do with timing, because you've probably all seen as judges someone give an outstanding speech and you think, oh, yeah, they should have placed. And then the contest chair gets up and the chief judge returns back. And Greer, you've probably, as chief judge, seen this a number of times, and that person's being disqualified for going 1 or 2 seconds over time. So when it comes to judging, we don't actually take timing into account. That gets sorted out later. But do you have any tips in your illustrious experiences of judging for people to not go over time? Cate?
Obviously, everyone who's delivering a speech is watching the timing lights. And when you're practicing your speech, practice to timing lights. I've got an app on my phone that's timers for Toastmasters, and so I can practice it with a little green light, amber light, and red light. And yeah, it's practice, practice, practice. And if you sit there and see the amber come on, you've got to sit there and think, how much more of my speech have I got? Am I actually running to time? And if you have to, cut a bit, because nobody knows what you're going to talk about except for yourself. So no one is going to know that you've cut something from the speech, as long as you just keep it all flowing smoothly together. And yeah, once you see that red light, basically shut up and sit down. I'm guilty of going in, we've just had a club contest, and I think I went to 7 minutes and 29 seconds. But I cut it before that 7:30, so I was fine.
Thanks, Cate. Greer?
One of the things that I speak to newbies at the club is about the way you structure your speech. Now, one of the things I say is that I quite often use the analogy, if you're going to go on a holiday, what's the first thing you do? And so many people say, I'll buy tickets, book things. But in the end, you've got to have a destination before you can do all of that. So once you've settled on your what the message is of your speech, go back, start at the beginning, have so much more information than you really need for the speech. You have your primary points, secondary points, but do a prepared ending so that when the timing light comes on, whether it's the orange light or whether it's the red light, you can work out exactly the timing. Whatever point you're on, round it out, drop all the other information that you're going to talk about, and then go into your prepared ending. And that way you'll always pretty well finish on time. So many people make, to my mind, in timing is that they've prepared a speech and they've got to say everything that they've prepared in the speech, when the reality is you don't need to. As Cate said, no one knows what you're going to say, so you never apologise for leaving something out.
Thanks, Greer. Darrell?
I'm really appreciating going third because it's been said. The one thing, unfortunately, unlike Cate, I, in my Toastmasters career, have been disqualified twice, both for less than 5 seconds over time. For me now, because I get really expressive when I speak, and sometimes I just completely forget about the timing. So it doesn't matter the contest. You can just sort of be presenting and going for it, and then all of a sudden you look up and the red light's on, and I don't know how long it's been on. So I've learned, unless you see the change to red light, if you see the red light and you don't know how long it's been on, just wrap it up, because it doesn't matter your ending at all, as has been said. I mean, it'd be nice to get a really rounded off ending in, but you're better off not having an ending than being disqualified.
Well done. Thanks, Darrell. And thanks, everyone, for this question particularly, because I've seen some really amazing speakers not even place, and then find out why, because there was one disqualification, which happened to be them. Luckily, I'm yet to get disqualified, but I'm always finding I'm pushing it a little bit. So some good tips there. When the red light comes on, stop. That's the key takeaway. Now, what about with respect to biases? This is my next question, because sometimes we might have seen the speaker before. We might have even seen that same exact speech. So how difficult can it be, and how do you eliminate the biases you may have, say, in favour of someone or perhaps against them? And we'll start with Cate.
Thanks, Jackson. I didn't see that one coming. It's one of those things that is actually quite difficult, but you've got to remember is the performance on the night. And there's been quite a few times when I've seen the speech go from club to area to division, and it's the same speech, but even though it's the same speech, you can see that they've worked on it and they've improved it and they've changed it. Have those improvements and changes actually worked as far as I'm concerned? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And yeah, it's really hard sometimes, but you just sit and go, no, what have they done tonight? And you can't afford to let the halo aspect come in as well. Oh, this is the person who always wins, therefore they're going to win. And you sit there and go, no, you know, if they can have a bad night and stuff up as well. So it's really so difficult, but you just sit there and go, okay, what are they doing tonight? How's their vocal delivery? How's their body language? How's their stage use? Is the story actually still running properly? You know, is the language, you know, and descriptions, and just really keep focused on that. And I'll almost forget who's giving the speech, but just how they're giving it. So that'd be what I'd say.
Really well said. Greer?
I've had over the years occasions where I've seen everyone in a division contest, every one of their speeches from club area to the division contest. I've always found that I'm fairly objective on that score. I'm not overawed by any one particular speaker. And so I suppose because I've been judging for close to 16 years at Toastmaster level, that I find that as Cate was pointing out, it's on what's happening on the night. And one of the things about judging is that as much as you try to be, you're comparing each speaker, because in the end you've got to go and pick 1, 2, 3. And so ultimately you're still comparing it to every other speech on the night. So it may still be a good speech and may have improved since you first heard it, but all the other speakers are in a similar boat. So, you know, you're comparing it to speaker 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're comparing every one of the speakers because you're going to make that final decision which one on the night is the best speech and who's second and third.
Thanks, Greer. And Darrell?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, I mean, we're all human. We're subjective creatures. We feel. And whether it's, you know, you might have seen the speech before, it might be a Toastmasters member that you spend a lot of time with. It might be the topic that really resonates with you. Judging isn't about that as much as possible. And that's why on the judge's eligibility form, it has all the written there reminding you that you need to be as objective as possible. Every ballot has on the instructions on the back, please be as objective as possible. The way I do that is, as Cate mentioned, it's, for me, every speech is different, even if you've heard it before, because it's a different time. And so there will be different nuances. There'll be timing changes. Somebody might be having a really bad day. And even though you've seen them presented amazingly well at a previous level, it might just not be great on the night. So you can't go in with preconceived ideas. And it's about just in the moment. Like as soon as somebody's speaking and you're judging, you're right there for them at that time. And then when they've finished, you need to cut that and then go for the next one and say, okay, I'm just doing this person this time, and then forget that and then move on like that. It's difficult, but that's why judging, I find really a good skill to learn, is because it's that objective, being able to really see and separate, that makes it such a strong skill and ability to have.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. So there's a common theme there. It's really about judging the speech on how it's presented on the night, not from what you've seen before or what you might expect from that speaker. Well, we're now at a red light, so let's give our wonderful judges a round of applause. And with that, what we might do is give them a bit of a break, although they're not going to get much of a break because they're going to be scoring the next 3 contestants. But we might move on to the contestant speech part of tonight's session. Now, before we move on to this, I do have a couple of caveats, I suppose. So the first thing to keep in mind is that some of these members are very new within Toastmasters. I believe for one of them, it's their 2nd or 3rd speech, which is really impressive. So we want to thank them for their time and for their efforts, and just set some expectations, because I think they're all good speeches and they've got a lot of potential, but this isn't world-class, world championship level caliber speakers. This is more about encouraging and getting to understand, as the title of this forum suggests, inside the mind of a judge. So it's really good to be able to see how these experienced judges will actually judge these speeches. Now, a couple of other things too is that they're video presentations. So they've all been pre-recorded in person and we'll play them on the screen. So we don't have to worry about timing or chief judges or disqualifications, any of that. It's mainly just about, we'll watch the recordings. Our Zoom Master Graham will have them on hand, I'm sure. And then I'll give the judges 1 minute to, like in a normal contest, calculate and deliberate their scores. Couple of other things as well. So I believe this is based on the international contest. So there are judging ballots which judges do follow. Now, Graham, I think we were talking earlier, do you have a copy of the judges' ballot? Because there might be people here who might like to do their own scoring. So if you could post something in the chat, that'd be good. Graham, do you have access to the ballot? Oh, yes, he's posted it here. Perfect. Okay. So if you want to score along and pretend to be a judge alongside our very experienced trio, feel free to download the ballot and complete your scores. Now, if I missed anything, I don't think I have, because my memory's normally pretty good. So I believe we can proceed. Now, they were kept secret from the judges, sort of in reverse to a normal contest. Normally, the contestants are not kept secret and the judges are. But now I'm going to introduce the first contestant, and then we'll play a recording of their speech. So I want to thank them all just again for their time, because it's one of those situations where without them, there's no contest. Without the judges, without people, and particularly the contestants. And so I'm going to introduce them, the title again, and their name again, and then we'll play a recording of their speech. So our first contestant for this mock contest is Roger Greenwood, and his speech is titled On Heuristics and Biases. On Heuristics and Biases, Roger Greenwood.
We like to think of ourselves as logical, rational beings that are in charge of our destiny and decide where, when, and how we go. I would contend that this is one of the primary conceits of our species. We are neither logical nor rational most of the time. And even when we try to be logical and rational, we are influenced by a vast array of heuristics and biases. And for those of you who are not entirely sure what heuristics are. The rules of thumb. The subconscious, in this case, often subconscious, definitely automatic, and often beyond our control, impulses that drive us in all sorts of directions. The field of economics proposes that we are logical actors in our own advancement, and we make logical decisions for our own benefits. And Kahneman and Tversky in the 70s demonstrated quite categorically that this is not the case. That these heuristics and biases drive us to irrationality on a regular basis. And to give rationality its due, we have come a long way. Science is a truly amazing human achievement. We have achieved many fabulous things, many not so fabulous, but we'll leave those for another time. But the Flat Earth Society and Pizzagate, where one believes that the Earth is flat and the other believes that a bunch of politicians in Washington are ritually murdering children in basements underneath a pizza, whatever, speaks powerfully to our capacity for irrationality and illogic. And much of this behaviour can be sheeted home to heuristics and biases, and there's a lot of them. I did a quick count on a website tonight before I turned up here, and I came up with 110 discrete heuristics and biases that influence us in ways that we do not generally even comprehend. We're not even aware that these things are operating. And when we do comprehend them, we're often quite powerless to actually do anything about it. And so, Kahneman and Tversky promulgate two modes of mental operation. There's system one, which is essentially our amygdala. It's the emotive side of our being. It makes snap judgments. I like you, I don't like you. I think that you're untrustworthy, and I think that you're overly nice. Just at a glance. As soon as you walk in the room, people have made those choices about you. You see something slithering in the grass beside you, you jump. You don't think about it, you just jump. Because it's self-preservation. It's a really good way of keeping ourselves alive. And to be perfectly frank, none of us have the mental capacity or the time to think through every decision that needs to be made. The vast majority of our decisions are made on the basis of, that looks good to me, that'll do. I do not have the mental capacity all the time to actually think through every step of a decision that I'm going to make. And examples of heuristics and biases are the availability heuristic. We are massively influenced by evidence that's in close proximity and preferably dramatic, which explains why the vast majority of people in the developed world think that things have never been worse. They think that we are poorer, they think that we are more stressed, that we are more strained, that we are more put upon than in any other epoch in human history. And that's because they watch the news, which is a foolish thing to do, and I'd strongly advise that you don't. Because the news is, because we are influenced by drama, if it bleeds, it leads. So the news is just a catastrophe of disaster, relentless, with no context. So you look around and you think, this is what's happening all around me, all the time. No wonder we are in such appalling shape. The reverse is actually the case. We have never lived longer, we have never lived with more luxury, we live with better health, we have more trustworthy systems than we have ever had. Yeah, sure, there's problems, no doubt about that. We have some very serious problems that we need to address, but we are in better shape than we have ever been. Yet, the vast majority of us believe that we're not. What on earth is going on? Heuristics and biases is what's going on. In-group, out-group bias. We like the people that we like because they're part of our in-group. Now, I'm a white Caucasian. I've never spent much time with people of other races, and frankly, from time to time, it's made me feel quite uncomfortable. In San Francisco, with a bunch of big black dudes, I was feeling entirely threatened. They were perfectly nice people. I had no reason to think of them as anything other than perfectly nice people. I was uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable because they weren't part of my in-group. Racism 101. And choice overload. Now, Jay, you get disqualified for this apparently, referencing somebody else's speech, but Jay mentioned that choice is a primary thing, and it is. Choice, a certain amount of choice is really good. But get too much choice, and our capacity to make a decision goes out the window. And so, that's why you have very complex pricing strategies for electricity, gas, telephones, whatever. The idea is to confuse you, destroy your capacity to make a decision, and then you are a sucker. And so it's just inevitably the case that our heuristics and biases drive us in all sorts of directions that we do not understand and are not particularly well suited psychologically to actually doing anything about. But it is a feedback loop, and you can make your heuristics and biases perform for you rather than against you to some extent. I think it's beyond all of us to actually do any more than tinker around the edges, perhaps. But here's to illogic and irrationality. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Now, can we please have 1 minute silence for the judges? And Graham, if you could indicate a green light at 60 seconds. Thanks, timer. And our second contestant for tonight is Luke Boreham with his speech entitled Generational Learning. Generational Learning, Luke Boreham.
The world has changed. For the first time ever, we now have 5 generations in the workforce. Organisations need to start thinking differently about how they structure their training to get the most out of it for our people, to get the most out of technology, and the best way we can set it up. The one size fits all approach is not going to work anymore. Tonight I'll share some insights into different generations we have in the workforce. I'll also share some information relating to some methodologies that organisations should be using today. So when we think about what the 5 generations are, we've got traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials or Gen Y, and Gen Z coming through. Each generation has been shaped by life-changing events that have happened in that time, whether it is a recession, a significant war, whether it comes down to advancements in technology, whether it relates to, more recently, a pandemic. There's 3 generations I probably want to touch on a little bit more because they're the current people in the workforce mainly at the moment. So we have baby boomers, we have Gen X, and millennials. Start with baby boomers. So they were born immediately after the Second World War. They have a preference of learning style, which is face-to-face. Verbal communication is really important to them. question and answer format, and they tend to lean towards hard copy materials with their training. They're very loyal in terms of company loyalty is really important to them. They have a really strong work ethic, and they take a lot of pride in their work. Next, we think about Gen X. So they were the first generation that had both parents working full time. So naturally developed a few traits where they're really resourceful, they're independent, and work-life balance is really important to them. They grew up with technology, so that is a learning preference for them. Internet came in probably around 15 teenage years, and they have a really strong preference for technology-based learning and social interaction. A couple of key Gen X individuals that come to mind. We have Elon Musk, Will Smith, and Julian Assange. Key little fun fact at the moment, we have 55% of the startup companies in the world are actually run by Gen X people, which I thought was really cool. Next, we'll talk about millennials. So millennials have had technology their whole life. They've grown up with the internet. They would have received smartphones probably at teenage years. They were still at an age where they had to play the game where they were calling their friends on a landline number or love interest and really hoping that the parents didn't answer the call, hoping that their friends were the first to pick up. So naturally there's a preference for technology-based learning. What's really important to them is around leadership. Their leader is a really important trait, and they're achievement orientated and they're really creative. So with this in mind, the learning style is technology-based. Interactive apps, using YouTube, searching the internet. A couple of key people come to mind is Mark Zuckerberg, Serena Williams, and Taylor Smith. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of learning methodologies. Micro-learning and gamification. Micro-learning is the concept of breaking learning down into smaller pieces. It allows us to digest information more quickly. We can absorb it faster. It's really good for complex learning. It's really good for some of the older generations that may not be as tech savvy. They can navigate technology. It's also great for the newer generations where we have short attention spans. And that's basically what we use social media for. So absorbing information in short ways. Gamification is a really interesting topic that I had not heard too much about. It's basically bringing game style into your learning. So the idea of taking people along for a journey, you can have, I've seen some organisations that do it really well. They have a little character that you follow along, you level up, and it's almost a happy consequence of playing the game that you actually learn something. It brings out competition in people. Leaderboards, you get immediate feedback. A recent study showed that 20% of e-learning courses being completed currently, if you include gamification, brings it up to about 90%, which is quite valuable. So I think it's pretty easy for organisations to start thinking about this. I'd be a bit amiss if I didn't bring AI into this. I think the demand is growing by the day. Every single day, everyone wants AI. There's two areas I think that AI can add the most value. Currently, it's really complicated to build interactive content at a fast pace. AI will allow us to build that in a lot faster speed, which will enable us to focus on other areas. The part that I think it can actually add the most value for us is we have a very diverse workforce. There's probably not as much opportunity for people that aren't speaking, let's say, English. We can build in bilingual capability with our learning content. So we can actually build it in one language and then make various iterations of it because we can do this stuff quicker. So it actually breaks down some of the barriers that we currently have with online training. So thinking about in terms of for organisations at the moment, I would be adopting a technology-based learning that is short, sharp, concise, self-guided, bring people together for face-to-face sessions to complement. People can share stories, it allows everyone to learn together. A recent study showed that once a person leaves an organisation, it takes approximately about 40 days for the organisation to replace that person, and in that time they're spending approximately $24,000. If we invested that money back into learning, think what's possible. So I think if we celebrate our diverse backgrounds, a different life experience, we could actually learn from each other, and there's so much to take in. If organisations started thinking about this and investing in opportunities through training, we'd be a far better place. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luke. Let's now observe another 1 minute silence for the judges. Thanks, Timer. And our third contestant for tonight is Siobhan Blewitt, with her speech entitled The Screen of Red. The Screen of Red, Siobhan Blewitt.
Years ago, our computer screens, all of a sudden, the marketer, ding, 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 ding. I'm supposed to be a stockbroker. Wow. And what I was seeing was the Japanese market opening. Down, down, down. 10%, 15%, 20%. We saw the Japanese market down 25% in 2 days. This is Friday. We're sort of bumbling along, nice quiet afternoon, not much happening. The reality of that day wasn't really acknowledged or noted. It was significant, or it was described on the day as a little unusual. One of the traders rang me and said, Siobhan, have you seen this currency market? It's doing something a bit weird. That is abnormal. You might just want to take note of it. I rang a few clients and said, I think we need to take profit in Macquarie, for example. Let's make some changes, small changes, but just be aware. So today I want to share a couple of points with you, lessons I've learned in the stock market. Communication is everything. And the 3 lessons I've learned I'll share with you this evening. Number 1, be direct. Be clear. Don't get it wrong. Now, the issue really is around when you're placing trades, you can't forget to put an order on, for example. Take, for instance, the Japanese market. It collapsed 25%. If I've forgotten to place a trade to sell a stock on the day, I am liable. I have to make good for the client. So the message is, be clear, be direct, provide the instructions to the operator and make sure that trade goes on. My God. The other sidebar to that is that as a kid, when I was learning to be a stockbroker, the message that you learned very, very, very quickly was your first loss is your best loss. Make sure that you tell someone if you've made a stop up. If you've forgotten to put the order on, if you put a wrong order on or too many zeros, and this is going to cost a lot of money, you've got to own up. If you have to tell people that you made that mistake, and my God, that's hard, that's excruciating. I was a kid. I was $26,000 a year earning capacity, and my first error was $6,000. I'd wiped out a huge amount of money for someone by just forgetting to put an order on. My God. So the message is, first rule, be clear, be direct. Your first loss is your best loss. Now, today with the markets as they were and the headlines being sensational, it made me think about, well, what else have we got here? What else is really important? Be clear, be direct. Your first loss is your best loss, but the second thing to worry about is to say, be clear in your language. Look at the headlines that we're seeing at the moment. Implosion, market collapsing, data missing, what's going on, hair on fire. And I had journalists ringing this morning. I had family members ringing. My mum at 7:30 this morning, dear, are we going to be okay? Are you all right? Is everything okay? Is my super fund all right? Mum's a dear teacher. She's so clear. She's so non-nonsense. She wanted reassurance. Someone at 10 to 8, Siobhan, I'm just going into a doctor's appointment. I think I've got Commonwealth Bank. Do I need a cell? Graham, ring me when you're out of your doctor's appointment and we can talk it through. The message is that people need to hear information. They do not want to hear me saying, Graham, you've got to sell now. This is it. This is a disaster. They don't want to hear hair on fire. They want to know the information. They want to hear it clearly. They want reassurance, but they want frankness as well. So the client, just as a snippet, who said, Siobhan, I think I've got Commonwealth Bank, the market's crashing, I've got to sell at 10 to 8 this morning after going to doctor's appointment, ringing me 15 minutes later. It actually turned out you're okay. You've sold the stock, you've got your money in a fixed term deposit, and you're going to be okay. The relief. Oh, thanks, Siobhan. Oh, I forgot that we've done that. Oh, thank you. And that sense of being able to provide that clear information is so important. So the message is, it's not hair on fire. It's not an implosion. We are going to be okay. But take a breath. And I learned this from my first boss. His daughter was an Olympian and she trained me. She was an Olympian and she knew what pressure was. And as a 21-year-old kid, when I saw the first market crash, I was running really fast. I was placing the orders, I was talking, and I was really hard. And my stockbroker boss said to me, first off, calm down. And secondly, if you slam that phone down again, I'm going to whack you. Walk slowly, think clearly, talk calmly. So the second message, being clear in your communication. And the third lesson in all of this is have empathy. Everyone wants to know that you get what's happening. But when I'm on the end of the phone, I want to know that the person who's answering my calls is not rushed, who's not too busy to talk to me, who's just, excuse. Have empathy. Listen. Wait. Provide some sensible responses and be useful. So the three lessons I've learned about the stock market are being clear, be direct, have empathy. And for those people who are taking their financial advice from TikTok or perhaps the Bitcoin traders, get an accountant, talk to an advisor. It's important. Empathy.
Thanks, Siobhan. And that concludes the mock contest. Now, usually what we'll do at this point would wait silently and awkwardly for these people called counters to collect the ballots of the judges, but we're not going to do that because it's a mock contest. So I'm going to send us all off on a nice break in a moment. Just a couple of things. So it'll be a 10-minute break. Try to come back slightly before 10 minutes because we will get started within 10 minutes. And also as well, just keep in mind, when we come back, the judges will be showing their scores and how they actually came to their conclusions for each of the scores they tallied up. Now, it's important to keep in mind, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, well, that's a bit of a low score. But just remember, sometimes there's a bit of a relative scoring method used, because if you score the first speaker 100 out of 100 or a really high score, you've got very little wiggle room after that. So also keep that in mind. But anyway, it's 8:24, nearly 8:25. Let's take a 10-minute break and try to be back a little bit earlier, and we'll start at 8:35. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 8:35, so let's get started. Now, just quickly, before I get the consensus of the judges, and we'll go one by one and show their scores, which I'm really looking forward to, I just want to quickly thank each of the contestants again. We'll get to hear from them later on as well, but in no particular order, we have Roger from Dandenong Rangers and the Hills Toastmasters. We've got Luke from Nalimbic Toastmasters, and we've got Siobhan from South Yarra, which is one of my clubs. So thank you all for coming tonight. Now, let's do something revolutionary that's never been done in Toastmasters before. Let's get the judges up, and we'll be nice to Cate because I know we picked on her a lot. We'll put her last, and this time we'll start with Greer. So if we could spotlight Greer and get her to share her screen, and she's got about 5 minutes to go through the scores and how she came to her totals. Welcome, Greer.
Right. Now, before I talk about the points, it should be stressed that points are relevant only to the individual judge and have no relevance to any other person other than the means of me being able to determine who I think may or may not be my first, second and third. So going to the point you made earlier, Jackson, before we looked at the speeches, it was making that very point. So in looking at the structures between the three of them, I sort of used, I felt they were in the good to very good category of speech development. And what I sort of found a little bit in the end was that Roger, when I sort of reviewed it before I wrote down I listened to all three speeches first and then went back and scored again, that I felt that at the beginning of the structure, there was a lot of information, but I wasn't quite clear about the subject matter initially, heuristics and biases, and I felt there could have been a bit better explanation at the beginning of the speech. Luke was clear in what he wanted to say. He told you he was going to talk about 3 or 4 different things and went through each of them. Siobhan did exactly the same thing. She was very clear right from the beginning of the 3 things she was going to talk about, and with each of them gave examples and end up put them together very well. So between the 3 of them, I just felt Siobhan was just that little bit better in the clarity of her speech development. And the effectiveness, of course, that goes to all the other aspects of it as well. Roger was a good, strong voice, probably at a higher level volume than the others, and at times went and had strong emphasis with some down to the physical area, with emphasis using, pointing to the floor when he was making some strong points. A very strong, loud voice. Luke, in the structure of, in the type of speech he was giving, he's very conversational, very soft, probably didn't have as much flexibility in his voice and the physical appearance. Both Roger and Luke very similar in the way they stayed relatively stationary in a sense to speak to the audience. Admittedly, the floor space was slightly different for both, but tended to do that. Siobhan really used a good flexible voice, was able to utilise the floor space very well and used her gestures to emphasise a lot of things. Really matched her voice, with giving examples. I think that she used a mother panicking or something like that, and then went to the, having the clarity of understanding, clarity of voice, very consistent in the way that she went through the whole speech, with the way she used her gestures, moved around the floor. You could see that the audience she was engaging with the audience all the time, compared to the other two. I just felt that there was that there. The manner, again, that sort of comes down to a combination of all the things above there, the directness of it. Siobhan, really, you could see the engagement with the audience. There was the assurance of the knowledge. Roger, very direct, very strong. I felt a little bit maybe like giving a lecture rather than, just a speech to the audience. Luke, I just felt because of that casualness in his voice, the softness, I didn't get the sense of engaging with the audience as strongly as the other two. And with the appropriateness of the speech and purpose and the correctness, each of them, I felt the purpose of their speech matched up right through the whole structure of their speech. So the reality between that, the language was appropriate to each of their speeches. So there, you would have been nitpicking to go plus or minus a point here or there. So overall, if I was judging on this occasion, I might have had a leaning towards Siobhan for those reasons. But that's but overall, they're all in the good to very good category. And one of the things I do sort of point out to when I give briefings to judges is that the first one, I try to give points to the higher standard I think the speech is worth, and I felt they felt in that category of good to very good.
Thanks, Greer. Really well said. That's what 15 years of judging experience can do. So very articulate, loved hearing it. Now we're going to throw over to Darrell. So if we can spotlight Darrell Klar and get him to share his screen. Welcome, Darrell.
I won't step through each individual, very, very similar. What I will do, just to give a bit of insight into how I look at it, I actually start at the top with the fair, good, very good, and excellent. So as I'm going through, you might have noticed if you happen to be watching me, I make little notes and little symbols in the rubric as the speakers are speaking. And then I sort of think to myself, okay, well, the speech development, was it fair? Was it good? Was it very good? Was it excellent? And so I decide on this before I actually give it a score. That helps me, I've found, be able to separate myself and to actually have the ability to be objective, because then I go, okay, no, well, for Roger, for example, for speech development, it was very good. It wasn't excellent. It was definitely above good and very good. So that led me to provide an 11. So I generally break it down into these four first and then provide a score. One of the other things I will say is that with every ballot, no matter the contest, you have to be aware of the breakdown. I've actually seen where judges have scored too high to start. And so let's say I gave Roger a 14 and then Luke came in and blew it away in terms of speech development. I've only got to go to 15. I've actually seen judges go, well, I'm actually going to provide a 16 or a 17 there. You can't do that because it throws out the fact that it all adds up to 100. And as soon as you go outside of this scale, you break that ratio and that structure, because you can see here for the speech value, it's worth 25. So when we come down here, 11, 6, 17, if we've added 2 extra onto here, then all of a sudden it's magnitudes more weighting the other thing that happens is everybody that's gone before misses out on that. And so, as has been mentioned, is the first one you never want to start too high. And that's why you can't really compare ballots, because it depends on where you start as to where you go. And that's why I use these 4 to help me to start, because I can go, well, that was good, and know that I'm not being too harsh. It wasn't very good, it was good, so I'll be fine putting down a 7 or an 8 for the first speaker. As we go through, just very quickly noting, physical for here, that was probably the biggest difference. Recognise Siobhan moved around a lot more, had a lot more impact through that ability to engage through movement. So grab some extra score there. Very similar down the bottom here for appropriateness and correctness. All 3 speakers were very good in that way. So essentially, very similar in terms of scoring for me across. The biggest ones were the physical, a bit of change here in the voice, but you'll notice that for me, I start with these top 4 first. Was it good? Was it not so great? Was it very good? And then I come down and say, okay, how very good was it? Was it just very good, or was it really very good? And then that can provide me and keep me within that ratio. So that's how I do my scoring.
Thanks, Darrell. Very insightful. And it's really good to get a bit of a breakdown of that, because I have seen times when judges have given someone an 11 out of 10, and it's good to sort of be mindful that we shouldn't be doing that. And that's a really good methodology to use to make sure we're scoring within the ranges. And finally, Kate's been waiting very patiently. Welcome, Kate.
The way Darrell was explaining how he does the scoring is very similar to how I will go through and do the scoring. And I know that where I start tends to vary a fair bit. And it often depends on how I'm feeling the day. If I'm feeling really a bit grumpy, I'll sit there and tend to score really hard. Or if I'm feeling more relaxed, I'll sit there and be going to the higher numbers. But as long as I say grumpy or happy for the whole contest, that doesn't matter, because everything becomes relative to that, and everyone gets the same sort of scorings. Speech development is one of the things that is really important, I think, when I'm doing the scoring, because you want to see the growth of the story and the structure coming through. And that's the whole point, as far as I can see, in making a speech. And the other that became quite important, I think, also is the physical body language. And that was where there was a fair bit of difference between these speakers, I thought, because Roger was quite fixated in one spot, while Luke was also fixated, but he was taking a step forward and a step back, and a step forward and a step back, and it was kind of a bit of a dance on the same spot. And then, of course, you had Siobhan that was sitting there and running around the whole stage and up and down the aisles. So those sorts of things really do make a big impact for me as a judge when I'm looking at what's going on. The voice flexibility, that's something that also gets a lot of impact for me as a judge. So that's one of the areas where I find a bit more contrast will come up between the speakers quite often. The last 2 sections, the appropriateness and the grammar, I think all of us judges have been saying, really, there's not a lot of difference there. And I sometimes wonder about why they're on there, because mostly the people who are getting up and giving speeches, they're all using the language that's appropriate for their speech. And I've never actually come across somebody who's delivered a speech that I've thought has been inappropriate for the contest. So those 2, I often find I ignore a lot on the ballot, and I focus on the areas above, so the delivery and the content. And that's where I go in. And I will also say that one of the things that really impacts me as a judge is that opening of the speech. How you start will sit there and make me think, yes, this person knows what they're doing. I can sit back, relax and enjoy the speech. And that very confidence in coming forward and delivering this speech kind of becomes, I would say, you know, one of the strongest parts. I mean, there was one contest I was judging, and it was a humorous contest. Before the speaker even got onto the stage, they had actually won that contest as far as I was concerned, because the title of their humorous speech had everyone laughing before they'd even opened their mouth. And I thought that that was a very clever way to get the audience on side. So these things all come into it as far as I'm concerned as a judge. So it's the attitude as you're coming onto the stage. So that's your physical appearance, your manner and your directness, assurance and enthusiasm. And the more that I see that, the more everything else tends to, I think, creep up. So for me, maybe I'm a little bit of a gut feel type judge rather than, you know, getting into the nitty gritty. But when you come out like that and you've got that directness, the assurance, the enthusiasm. I mean, I think it was Luke moved the lectern out of the way, claimed his space. And, you know, Siobhan was the whole, you know, ding, 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 you know, really attention grabbing things. Roger, I didn't think had that same strength in his opening. So these things, I think, as a contestant, really focus on those sorts of things because they do get that manner, they get that movement, they really come across, I think, in conveying what you're talking about in your speech. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Kate. Just a quick one. Thanks very much for that. Would you be able to just zoom out a little bit so we can sort of see the full ballot on one page? I've just had a couple of comments in the chat.
I'm not quite sure how to do that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah,
No
I was
worries.
playing around with it and I couldn't quite get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. We'll
Where there's the plus and the minus sign.
Okay, yep.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much to all of our expert judges. That was really good to be able to see a breakdown of how they came up with their scores. And the scores were different, but there was a good level of consistency there, I thought. So much appreciated. Now what we're going to do, this is where it gets really exciting. This is something that, again, we've probably never seen before. This is the chance for contestants to not grill the judges, but to just have a bit of a dialogue with them and ask them some questions, perhaps about how they came to their conclusions or anything else they might have. So we've got 3 contestants, Roger, Luke, and Siobhan. I'm going to throw over to you guys. And if you think of a question, jump in, share it, put your hand up, ask the judges. We might start with anyone. So can we have a question from the contestants? Look.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackson. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity. It was so helpful to hear the detail and the information and what makes speeches tick. I think it's also seeing how each of you clearly define. It helps us go away and practice and improve. So thank you for the opportunity because it's gold. It really is. And I know that I've got work to do here. I appreciate the message that it is stagecraft and a strong opening hook and a strong conclusion. And I can say that I need to go away and practice, but I appreciate the opportunity and wanted to thank you all.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. We couldn't have done it without you. Roger, yes.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Very interestingly, you all came up with the same ranking, the 3 of you. The only difference was that Darrell had me and Siobhan tied on the same score. And the second takeaway is, for God's sake, when you're thinking, keep your mouth closed. Jesus. Let's see now. Really, really interesting stuff from the three judges, from Darrell and Greer and Cate. And thank you very much for putting in the time and effort. This has just reinforced to me the value of video, which I've never been brave enough to do until now. And thanks to Annie Martin for organising that lot. I'm way more shambolic than I think of myself as being, and video illustrates that very clearly. So it's been a thoroughly entertaining evening, myself on video notwithstanding. And again, thank you all very much, and thank you to everybody who organised this. It's been most instructive.
Thanks, Roger. Luke.
I just want to say a quick thank you. It was really good to obviously have the first session where we sort of got a little bit into the mind of what you're looking for, then obviously play our recordings. It's only my second speech that I've given, and I'm about to give my third one this week, which I can take a lot from tonight into that. So it was really good to see everyone's different styles and how that comes about. And obviously we're going to keep working on that and what makes us the best presenter we can. But it's really good to a couple of the takeaways that and advice that we can sort of apply. I think it was really good. Really good thing to be a part of. As a person, it's obviously got my presentation, but then also the rest of the group as well. There was lots of questions that came up that, you know, can take away as well. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Luke. Now, does anyone have, particularly the contestants, a specific question for any of the judges? Because I really appreciate the thank yous and the comments. That's fantastic. But let's maybe save them until the end. Any specific questions about the scoring or method? Siobhan?
The best hook that you've seen, Darrell? The best opening hook.
Oh my goodness. I have seen so many speeches. I don't know that I can recall one that stands out specifically. I think for me, it's interesting in hooking the audience. One thing that works for me as an audience member is being asked a question. I've found that when a speech starts with a question and I have to engage with that to actually go, oh, I need to have something so that the rest of the speech, you know, it has worth or whatever, then instantly I'm there and I want to know why I've been asked that question, and is the answer that I have good, bad? Am I going to learn something really important? And so while I can't pick out anything really specific, I think for me, the best hook right at the start of a speech is to ask a question of the audience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Could I comment a little bit on that as well?
Greer. Hello.
Hi to you, Siobhan. One of the things that I've pointed out over many years to both judges but also contestants, because I know I've been asked after a contest, what do I need to do to win a contest? And as a judge and a panel of judges, I quite point out that on any given night, I could sort of give you some advice about your speech, but at the next time around, there may be a different panel of judges, and therefore you can't guarantee the same result even if you improve your speech. And the other aspect of that is that even if it was the same panel of judges, and Cate pointed this out a little bit, depending on how you're feeling on the night, you know, on the first time they hear your speech, that they may be all in a good mood, but one of the judges the next time might have stubbed their toe just as they were walking into the room. So all of those things come into it. So I really am a person who says just judge the first speaker to the highest standard possible, that you feel it's possible, and then after that the rest falls in. But if you there's no way in the world I could give you good things, but there are some good people such as Mark Hunter and people like that who are excellent at helping develop speeches. But even with their advice, there's no guarantee that a panel of judges would award you first place.
Of course, that's the fun of it.
Perfect. Roger?
Could each of the three, Darrell and Cate and Greer, talk to appropriateness? I've done a little bit of judging and I have no idea what that means. I mean, apart from getting up on the stage and swearing profusely or supporting Nazism, perhaps I really struggle with that.
As I was saying,
after you, Cate.
Sorry, Darrell. As I was saying, it's one of the things that I've never really heard a really inappropriate speech. They say in Toastmasters that you should avoid politics, religion, and sex. I've heard a speech that incorporated all three of them and actually was very appropriate because of the way it was done. And so it really is very hard to, because people aren't going to try and shoot themselves in the foot by coming out generally and saying something incredibly offensive and inappropriate. And it comes down to mostly to the manner in which things are said. But yeah, so as I said, appropriateness is one I find very difficult to give much differentiation in. So probably doesn't help you that much, Roger.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, Roger, I'd also basically concur with Cate there, but things like if it's, say, talking about religion, is whether it's proselytizing as opposed to giving a sense of the community that the person grew up in and is involved in, like a heritage or a history of how their community worked, as opposed to trying to recruit people. The same with politics. So that, to me, is where the appropriateness sort of comes in, along, roughly along that line.
And for me, appropriateness on the ballot, it says about the speech purpose and the audience. I have seen a speech delivered by an engineer, and they utilized acronyms and terminology and a lot of concepts that, as an audience, we had no idea what they were talking about. And it wasn't a contest speech, but it was just the fact that for the audience, it wasn't appropriate. It was the evaluator struggled to provide any real evaluation because they just didn't understand what happened. So it's also audience-based. So 99% of the time it's fine, but if you sort of go off in something that nobody knows about, you're going to struggle. The other thing is to the speech purpose. If you're trying to inspire and you're utilizing stories that do the opposite, then I pull that into appropriate, whether what you're trying to achieve matches what you're delivering. And it might not be the appropriate stories or the appropriate concepts to achieve what you're looking to achieve. But again, what are you trying to achieve? Sometimes that's not easy to tell. So they're the really only two things that I find I have been able to score heavily on in appropriateness.
Luke, yes.
I'm keen to hear a little bit more about body language and stage presence. I think Siobhan did it so well in her speech, moving around. My fear is if I did it, it would be a distraction away from what I'm actually saying. As judges, what do you look for in terms of that being an effective tool in your speech?
Yeah, Luke, one of the things that I look for is, does it feel appropriate to what you're saying? Now, if you looked at the videos tonight, you could see that Siobhan, and this is not to overly pump her tyres up, but she used the simple hand gestures which matched the words that she said. She used good pausing and appropriately just moved around the audience to sort of engage them, so the audience had to follow her. So that was a nice subtle. There wasn't any rushing from it. One of the things that drives me nuts watching things, we know in Toastmasters, a lot of the evaluations love to use the timeline thing, the past, the present, the future. So you walk to the furthest point of the stage at stage left as you passed, and then you can see almost mechanically walking to the middle to do the present, and then mechanically walking to the stage right to sort of do the timeline, and that's is a distraction because it looks as though it's mechanical. It doesn't look as though it's matching what you're saying, and too many gestures, like I've seen people use almost a total finger gesture for every word that they were speaking, and that becomes distracting. So it's got to match your personality as well.
I'll agree with Greer on that, because you can't sit there and force yourself into a different personality. The first thing you've got to be is yourself. And I can remember once sitting there and talking about the contests that had been there, and somebody was saying, oh, they didn't move around, and they weren't using the stage. And I said, well, I think that wouldn't have been right for the subject matter that they were talking about, because it was a very serious speech. And I think that in that, they being quite fixed in the one spot and just talking straight to the audience actually put more emphasis in what they were saying. So the not moving around and being very set in where they were worked a lot better for that speech. So it will very much depend on what the speech is and how it is. But the main thing is to have the movements very natural, but also purposeful. So there is the world is huge, that can sit there and work. But if you're just in there and going, oh yeah, and everything was going on, and it's the gestures just go on, and you're just going, well, they've lost their effect. So it's something to practice in front of the mirror or filmed on the camera, watch it back and go, yes, that works, or no, that just really was a distraction. And if it distracts, it's not good.
Yeah, for me, this is a really interesting question, Luke, because when I'm working with people who are looking to become professional speakers, there's a difference between communicating with your family and friends, communicating professionally on stage, and communicating in a Toastmasters contest. When we're communicating with friends, it's all very unconscious. And believe it or not, you actually use really, really good body language when you're with your friends. You just don't realize it. It's just because it happens, and you use your arms to help tell the story. When we come into a space like Toastmasters and we're very conscious of what we're doing, all of a sudden our brain's focused on what's coming out here, it forgets about the body. So that's probably the lesson to learn, is to get comfortable enough that you feel like you're just talking to your friends. And that's a piece of advice I've given many of my mentees is imagine the audience as a friend, and you're just telling a story, and you can get, excited about excitable things. And, you can hear in my voice that sometimes I get a little excited as well. But it's important to note, though, that if you are going to speak professionally, then that doesn't work on stage in a professional setting. If you're having a discussion and telling a story, sure, that's great. But if you're up to achieve a particular purpose or do training, then that style doesn't work as well. So it's important to note the different environments you can have when you're speaking. And if you think about you don't think about the way you're talking when you're communicating with friends, which is why it's so natural to then use your body. If you can get to that in your Toastmasters speaking, you're on a winner.
Thanks, Darrell. So I can see we've reached a red light. So let's have one more round of applause for our fantastic contestants and wonderful judges. You've all been amazing. Now, speaking of amazing and wonderful, tonight couldn't have happened without our reigning, undisputed area director winner of the year, Annie Martin, and I'm sure there's many future trophies in her cabinet to come. I'll pass back to her to close the meeting. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you, Jackson. That's lovely. Oh, that was great. Thank you. You three judges, Darrell, Cate, Greer, just you're so generous too in your pearls of wisdom. Love the way you are so open and transparent showing those ballots. I know the contestants got a lot out of it. Luke, Roger and Siobhan, you absolutely good on you for coming along, for coming back and I could see what you were getting out of it chatting with the judges. So, and tonight could not have happened without two people, and one is Graham in the background doing all of that, recording this session. Please go back and have a look on the District 73 webpage and have a look at it. Probably be up in about a week or so. And people who, I know there are a lot of people interested tonight who were competing or judging. So we hope that they'll go and have a look too. And finally, Jackson Green surpassed all expectations. My expectations were up here, but you went way above them. You brought it all together. It was a complex idea, but the whole thing came together. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we do hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.